180 years ago, in 1831, when Wesleyan was founded, the Methodists had just emerged as the largest denomination in the United States. A position they would occupy, and still do occupy, I guess, at least would occupy for much of the 19th century, as they played a central role in shaping this nation. They had started, however, as an upstart denomination, whose members were mostly poor and marginal, workers, farmers, slaves. Their clergy were poor and poorly educated. In fact, Wilbur Fisk, the first president of Wesleyan, was in fact the only Methodist minister in the New England Conference who had a university degree in 1831. In Middletown, the elite, which was not Methodist, but was Congregationalist and Episcopalian, the Middletown elite wanted a college. They wanted to compete with New Haven, which had Yale, and with Hartford, which was getting Trinity. And they had buildings, because what we now call North and South College had been used by a failed military academy. The Methodists wanted to develop an educated clergy and an educated laity. The Methodists were already beginning their slow upward mobility to become part of the American elite. And in the 1820s and the 1830s, they founded a number of colleges. Wesleyan was only one, and not the first, but it was the first of those which survived. And so the needs of the Middletown elite and the eagerness of the Methodists to encourage education in their numbers led to the founding of this university in 1831. And its charter made it quite clear that Wesleyan was to be neither a secular university nor a sectarian one. There was no religious test, that is, you did not have to be a Methodist to be on the Board of Trustees or to be a professor. And the Board of Trustees, in fact, consisted largely of non-Methodists in the early years. The presidents, however, of Wesleyan from 1831 on until 1923 were all Methodist pastors, with one brief exception. The first two, Wilbur Fisk and Stephen Owen, were essentially revivalist preachers as well as noted, respected intellects. They established a model of combining piety with intellectual rigor, which became the typical Wesleyan brand. Fisk's inaugural in 1831 seems to foreshadow a lot of what Wesleyan later became. It's good reading, I recommend it to you. Fisk said way back in 1831 that colleges should start to de-emphasize Greek and Latin, which most of them did, and concentrate on modern languages and the sciences. On the other hand, he was not enthusiastic about the arts, which he said had contributed much to the present dissolute state of morals in Italy. He was enthusiastic about what we would now call globalization. His speech deals a great deal with the fact that we are now dealing with intercourse which is maintained between different and distant parts of the earth. And he thought that Wesleyan would shape young people who would engage with that globe. He wanted young people to be educated not to make money, but to serve the nation and to serve the world. He wanted them to be at the forefront of advancing political reform. He wanted the education to be such that a young person could with facility pass from one employment to another, a vision that we still hold for liberal arts education. The student body was by and large very pious. The early presidents were revivalist preachers, and they sought to have revivals of religion constantly among the student body, and they broke out periodically. A survey that was done in 1870 of all of Wesleyan graduates up to that time discovered that about half were Methodist. 3/4 were, quote, professors of religion. And a professor of religion then did not mean what it means today. A professor of religion was someone who would publicly affirm his allegiance to Jesus Christ. 40% of the graduates to that time had become ministers, but by no means all of them Methodists. Now in 1870, the Wesleyan Charter was revised, and the university became an official denominational university. The charter read, at all times, the majority of the trustees, the president, and a majority of the faculty shall be members of the Methodist Episcopal Church. Why this change? Why from the a broad Presbyterian, a broad Protestant college with a Methodist flavor did Wesleyan become an official Methodist institution? It was pushed largely by wealthy alumni who were Methodists, people with names that you might recognize like Judd, Andrus, Fairweather, people who had made a great deal of money in New York and other places, wanted to bring a closer tie between the university and the denomination to secure the financial future of Wesleyan. Under Methodist leadership after 1870, Wesleyan, for the most part, prospered. Many of the buildings that we see around us, Judd Hall, Fisk Hall, Miss Chapel, Scott Labs, which are now Albritton, were built in the Methodist period. The faculty became professionalized. By 1910, most of them had PhDs. Increasingly, they were hired for their scholarship, not for their denominational affiliation. One, a young Presbyterian, was hired by the history department. His name was Woodrow Wilson. Faculty salaries were raised, leaves and sabbaticals were provided. The faculty started wearing academic regalia at commencement. The faculty started seizing power from the president, took control of the curriculum, introduced electives. Up to that time, students' courses were all set for the 3 years that they were here. Now they could choose courses to some extent. The sciences were introduced and flourished. The honor system, which we still have, was instituted. Sports, choral music, fraternities all became a large feature of Wesleyan in this Methodist period. Generally speaking, the Methodists were pleased with this prestigious university, and for the most part, the alumni were pleased to be closely tied to the Methodist Church. But there was one oddity about those Methodists, one problem. They insisted on coeducation. 2 years after the charter was changed, the first 4 women were admitted to Wesleyan. A few African Americans came from time to time. And David Potts's classic volume of Wesleyan history shows that the Wesleyan student body, white and male predominantly, was not particularly friendly either to African Americans, and particularly to the women who suffered various kinds of humiliation and harassment over these years. Generally speaking, though, Wesleyan became the modern university that we now know under Methodist oversight. Early in the 20th century, however, the new professionalized faculty started to chafe under Methodist supervision. Professor of geology was teaching evolution in his courses and got into trouble with some of the more conservative members of the Methodist clergy. Wilbur Atwater, professor of chemistry, discovered in his researches that alcohol was of nutritional value. And this brought him into conflict with Methodism, which was, both in its liberal and conservative wings, committed to teetotalism. Both students and alumni desperately wanted to get rid of the women, because the fact that Wesleyan was coeducational meant that young men preferred to go to Williams and Amherst, and Wesleyan was falling behind. Then along came Andrew Carnegie, who created TIAA, which is now the pension system that all Wesleyan and most university professors around the country belong to. And one of Carnegie's stipulations was that no sectarian college could enter into the TIA system. So under these various pressures, in 1907, the charter was changed again, and the denominational affiliation with the Methodist Church ceased. Wesleyan then became a broadly Protestant college committed to a liberal interpretation of Christianity, to the social gospel, and committed to the creation of a male Protestant elite, male because the women were now gone, who were expected to lead the country. The last Methodist minister president was William Shanklin, who left office in 1923. By 1948, the largest body of students at Wesleyan were Episcopalians, followed by Catholics. There were about 30 or 35 Jews, and about 100 Methodists, but they were a distant third. Religion was still central to college life, right up, I gather, until the presidency of Victor Garfield, which ended in 1967. So, as you can see, Wesleyan was an official Methodist college only for 37 of its 180 years. But I hope you've also got the impression that it was under Methodist leadership for far, far longer, and under Methodist inspiration, even longer still. So the question is that Methodist spirit still with us, now that we are well established as a pluralist and secular university? Well, 2 points. The emphasis on openness and inclusion, which the Methodists who founded the university in 1831 established, and has been a hallmark of the institution, has been the hallmark of Methodism. That point 1, openness and inclusion. Point 2, that education is service, that the purpose of education is for service to the nation and to the world. 2 distinctives, I think, of the Methodist tradition. If at various points in her history, Wesleyan has been a leader in these regards, marking herself as somewhat distinctive from her competitors, and I think we can say that it has. If that is true, then the Methodist spirit has animated her far longer than her years as a Methodist school, and it has by no means totally disappeared.